Hi Year 6, long time no see. So this last week or so you've been having story times with Miss Islam. She's been reading Yr6, but the last 2 days, unfortunately, she's been really busy, tied up in training sessions, so she hasn't been able to record today's story time. So you get to see my face for the first time in a long while, and I will be reading a poem from a collection of poems by Ted Hughes with illustrations by Raymond Briggs. And I'm going to be reading you one of the poems from this text. Okay, so the poem that I'm going to be reading to you is called Nessie, the Mannerless Monster. So when you hear Nessie, who or what do you think of? So you hear Nessie and monster. Who or what do you think this poem is going to be about? Right, so Nessie, the Mannerless Monster. In Scotland is a loch. At the bottom of this loch, in the pitch black, a monster lives called Nessie. It is just her luck. She's about the size of a truck, but shaped like an old sock, with a long worm of a neck. She's beginning to feel sick. She is sick with sorrow. Nobody thinks I exist. They all say my time has passed. They say I'm a fairy beast. I do not want to boast, but I will make myself known or bust. So Nessie rises in a great burst of spray. She smashes the water to mist. She scuds around doing her worst, but people just keep on driving past. They say, no, such things do not exist. Soon she grows tired and has to lie there having a rest. Then in a rage, she outs onto the road. She says, I don't want to be rude, but after all, I have my pride. She says, I'm going to make a raid on Edinburgh. Then all the tourists cried, What's that? What's that? Oh, let me hide. And then they crashed their cars into the roadside. They covered their eyes, hoping the sight would fade. But Nessie walked straight on. She paid no heed. The mayor of Edinburgh nearly had a fit when he saw Nessie. Look at it! Look at it! He cried and fainted right there on the spot. But the police said, Whose is that huge cat? It's blocking our traffic more than a bit. Divert it south to London. So that was that. Nessie had not opened her mouth and she was out, tramping south towards London, alone and on foot. As she was tramping down through Northumberland, out of a ditch pops his foxhound. Look, he howls, a fox as long as a brass band. The other hounds come running up and all stare stunned. Then, wow, they chase Nessie all over the ploughed land and into a wood out at the far end, then into a meadow and round of the cows and round. I'm no fox, cries Nessie, but they can't understand. She dives into and just fills up a duck pond. The huntsmen gallop up when they see Nessie making a stand. They turn away their horses and tuck their hounds under their arms and creep off home, quaking with fear, and no wonder, seeing Nessie there in the duck pond like a coal-black 40-foot gander. She marches in south into Yorkshire, the greatest shire. Now she says, I have heard there are honest folk here who will all cry Nessie the minute I appear. But what does she find? The streets are all empty and bare. Everybody sits indoors in front of the TV with a dead stare. There is nothing in the streets but cats, dogs and the odd parked car. She peers in at the windows and whistles, but nobody can hear. For the TV and its laughter and uproar and gunfire, there's no other sign of life in all of Yorkshire anywhere, till she meets a little boy and he shouts, Hey you, get out of here! Next, travelling through the woods to avoid the cars, she meets Sir Mims Coldimple Bagfork Humberly Pass. You'll come to dine, offers that gent with a laugh. Of course. And he rips off an utterly dumbfounding curse that kills a big orange horsefly on the ear of a nearby horse. Nessie devours partridges, pheasants, pig heads, pike and parts of hares. She drinks whiskey and wine until it pours out of her ears. Then she snaps up the servants, the cook too, in spite of his roars. She swallows a settee for wadding, the whole item disappears. And finishes off her host in one gulp and says that was a solid first course. And falls down on the carpet and without apology snores. All of which proves she was completely without manners and a perfect monster. Can you remember what we call this? Partridges, pet pheasants, pig's heads, pike, parts of hares, whiskey, wine. Begins with an A. Next, she came up with 10,000 people and then some. They all marched packed together with hair and their drum. They carry banners with words, ban the bomb. They're all laughing and singing, and Nessie thinks, is this a party? Can I come? Be our mascot, they cry. Oh, peaceful beast, beautiful and dumb. So Nessie marches along at the head of them. She has no idea what this is all about, but all these people follow her with a song and a dance and shout. They are taking me to the Queen, thinks Nessie, and the Duke of Edinburgh will say, there's that bonny lassie, then I shall be all right, I shall have class. And everyone will say, oh, everybody knows Nessie, she's a grand... Well, let's try that with a different accent. Then everyone, I shall be all right, I shall have class. Everybody will say, oh, everybody knows Nessie, she's a grand lass. I think it needs to be sort of more a northern accent. And all these good people are bringing this to pass. But when they got to the heart of London and Trafalgar Square, somehow everybody disappeared into thin air, leaving hundreds of policemen yawning there. Whenever she asked a policeman the way to the Queen, he politely directed her to the zoo. And so she followed the policeman's finger, which is what people in London do. When Nessie walked through the zoo fence, the gorilla burst his bars and fled far into the distance. The keepers jumped clean out of their clothes at the first glance and hid behind the tigers, which stood in a dumb trance. The wolves fell into a dead faint at once. The elephants gave up all thoughts of defence. The eagles went rigid and cried, we're only weather vanes. The snakes murmured, take no notice of us, we are only vines. The tortoises pulled in their heads and legs and whispered, we are stones. The lions lay still with eyes closed and tried to look like sand dunes. And Nessie wandered around saying, are all these creatures queens? Till up came the small mammal housekeeper, braver than the rest. We have no place, he said, for your sort of beast. Go to Kensington Museum, that would be best. They have all your cousins there, prettily encased. You can meet them all and have a real feast. Thank you, cried Nessie. I'll do just as you suggest. I was beginning to feel weary and depressed. I never knew I had cousins. When they see me, won't they be surprised? In Kensington Museum, all the curators stared. They stared at Nessie. They'd never seen anything so weird. Where are these cousins of mine of whom I've heard? Asked Nessie. But everybody went on staring. Nobody said a word. Where are they? Cried Nessie. They'll tell you I do truly exist, and that I'm not a fairy beast and not a dream beast. Then up spoke a world-famous scientist. Imposter! You're impossible! If you were extinct and no more, indeed I would say you were a plesiosaur. I have plenty of the bones of that beast, which in its day was not at all rare, but all plesiosaurs, say our books, have been dead for 1,000,000 years. Yet you are alive, look at you. So who knows what you are? Go away and don't bother us in here. Then they all hurried to their jobs and left Nessie alone in despair. Nessie wandered sadly along High Street. Get a move on, snarled all the taxi drivers leaning out. A huge lorry bumped her backside with hoot after hoot. Tourists gasped, look, quick, another famous London sight. Londoners thought she was an advert for a circus coming that night. Policemen roared, drive on the left, idiot, not on the right. What with all the noise and crowds, Nessie was in a great fright. But all at once, a voice from the crowd roared, Ness! Her eyes popped when she heard her name. Joy made her nearly delirious. It was a wretched Scots writer of verses, Willis by name, and he was penniless. But he knew a monster when he saw one. Oh, yes. Nessie, he cried, and gave her flipper a great kiss. She told him her woes, and he cried, alas, 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 we shall go without hesitation to the palace. Let me ride, and you run. And so in no time they were off at a great pace. When they galloped up to Buckingham Palace, guards barred the way. Dogs on a leash, they ordered, and no visitors today. So Willis cried, the Queen's greatest subject has something to say. Nessie here is the Queen's greatest subject, I will have you know. But the guards just bristled their moustaches, and it was a no-go. Whereupon Nessie simply ran over the guards and left them looking for their hats. But then the palace army, which always waits, the palace army which protects the Queen from all dangers and frights, did not stand staring like dumb mountain goats. They barked commands, scampered to their posts, manned their guns, gloated through their gun sights. And Nessie and Willis were at any moment about to be blown to bits. Stop! Stop! Shouted Willis. Let's have a peace talk. Then out onto her balcony, the Queen came for a look. Her crown on her head, her stout skins over her arm to see this freak. At the sight of Nessie, she uttered a strange croak. But then, like a true queen, most politely she spoke, saying, what do you want, for heaven's sake? Then Willis up and gave his speech on Nessie's behalf. In no time at all he told her how her times were so tough. In no time at all he told her the causes of her grief, living up there in Scotland, monstrous beyond belief. And the Queen was touched with concern for this gigantic national waif. Then the Duke made a joke, and the Queen gave a laugh. "You shall be Vice-Regent of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland," she said, "for the rest of your life." And so it comes about that Nessie reigns in Loch Ness. On Sundays, all along the shores, the people press. The bands of the Coldstream Guards and Scottish Light Infantry play en masse. Nessie cruises up and down with a coronet on her head. She is delighted. She's never had it so good. And Willis is a civil servant, so he sees that she's well fed. And he's delighted too. He gets so well paid. And what finer life can there be than living on the shores of a marvellous lake, with a pet monster and doing as you like? The scientists come in tribes for a look. Nessie invents stories about her ancestors, and they write them all down in their book. And whenever the Queen visits Scotland, she visits this loch. Then she and Nessie sit sipping tea and have a really good talk. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that poem. It's quite a long one. I'm assuming that you all now realise that Nessie is the mythical beast that we know as the Loch Ness Monster. So Miss Islam will be back on Monday with chapter 10 of the Yr6. I am still planning lessons around the Yr6, so make sure that you are tuning in and listening, because you will need to be listening to the story in order to complete the activities. And Willow class, phone calls next week. Expect to be hearing from me. Bye.